guys, welcome back to Hack and Splash Page. I'm Tiffany, and I want to start off today's episode by thanking you guys so much for the great response to last week's episode where we covered Bitch Planet. I got some really amazing comments from you guys, some interesting perspectives, and new points made about Bitch Planet. Now, today I wasn't 100% what I wanted to do, but it's actually pretty rainy and cloudy outside, and for me, that makes me want to do something with horror. So what I decided to do today was witches, also known as, man, trees are really scary now, right? I noticed things about trees, especially the little holes where you used to think owls lived, everywhere. You become hyper aware of them and how frightening they actually are thanks to this series. Thank you, Scott Snyder, for making me afraid of the woods. So the book is 3 issues at this point. It started back in October 2014. It's written by Scott Snyder, art by Jock, and coloring by Matt Hollingsworth. Let's start off by talking about what's been going on. Really brief summary. I don't want to spoil too much about this, but we do have the 3 issues under our belt. We would have had 4. The 4th is supposed to come out January. Unfortunately, it's been pushed back to early February, so, you know, in theory we'll be getting 2 issues in the month of February, but we'll see what happens. Another important thing to note about this is supposedly after the first issue came out, Brad Pitt's company, Plan B, was in talks to turn this into some sort of motion picture or miniseries or something. I'm not 100% what that was, but it's still really exciting nonetheless. Really, it starts off within the first few pages, and it really sets the tone. Those first few pages are set in the early 1900s, and it just really hints at what you're getting into. You get your feet wet within those first few pages, and then we are catapulted forward into 2014, where we meet our protagonist, the Rooks family, and we learn about how they have recently moved. And throughout the first 3 issues, we start to understand why they recently moved. That focuses on the Rooks' daughter, Sailor Rooks, who is a teenager and not a member of the Sailor Scouts. The book focuses a lot on the relationship between father and daughter, and actually the character of Charlie Rooks, father and children's author, is pretty integral to this book, and I like him a lot. I think he's a really great character, and I'm really interested to see where he goes. The fact that he is a children's writer is super important too, because we get to see pages from Charlie's current story that he's working on. Really quick timeline of events here, again without trying to spoil anything. Sailor is starting off her first day of school. She goes off to school. People are kind of aware of this dark history that she has. It's a pretty powerful history, and actually we will touch a little bit on it at one point in this video. She goes off to school, you know, and we immediately have a flashback, and we are introduced to Sailor's experience with these witches. After that, we get a greater feel for the family dynamic that the Rooks have, and we end issue 1 on a fairly significant kind of cliffhanger, and issue 2 picks up, and we just take off from there. Issue 2 really is where you know, it's like Snyder established, all right, here's kind of the status quo, but kind of not the status quo, and now we're just gonna go. And it's pretty much the next day in school. And Sailor's really been struggling with what just now recently happened to her, and the world around her is starting to change a little bit, but those, you know, normal, you know, peers don't seem to notice it. She ends up leaving school and takes off to go face whatever it is in the woods. If you can imagine for a moment, that probably doesn't end up going so well for her, and issue 2 leads seamlessly into issue 3, and by the end of issue 3, we don't necessarily know what is going to end up happening with Sailor. We barely see her at all, actually, in issue 3, which I think is a great storytelling device. But there was a great splash page right at the end of issue 3 where we get not only a great little father-daughter moment in this like horrific nightmarish scenario that she's going through. I can't even tell you how badly I am looking forward to seeing what comes next because of this single image. I just cannot wait. So I'm gonna kind of leave it off there with what's been happening. I know this has been a very fragmented summary, but again, because of the fact that it is horror, and I think there could be such an emotional connection with it, I don't want to ruin too much for you. Why don't we instead talk about the writing? Scott Snyder. My experience with him has been from American Vampire. I read the first volume of that. I don't know how to pick up anymore. I really liked it. I've also read Court of Owls. And I got to be on 2 different back issues actually, where Sal explained first Death of the Family, which you can check out here. I'll probably put something in there. And also Zero Year, which I'll put in here now as well. If you're going to pick this up, make sure you definitely read some of the back stuff, because in the first issue he explains where the idea for witches came from, and it just adds another layer to the world itself. It really, for me, shows the difference between Snyder writing for a pre-established character like Batman and Snyder creating a world of his own based on something that has such a deep meaning for him. And I prefer something like this to his Batman run, but I gotta tell you, I do love Court of Owls. I think that writing is amazing, but this is my preferred Snyder. He's an excellent storyteller. The book flows really seamlessly for me. The characters all have a fairly individual voice. The Rooks family themselves, you know, they have great conversations, and they really feel like a family that has been together for a number of years. All of the relationships in the book, he really subtly grows right in front of you. You know, it feels like, as you're reading the dialogue between father and daughter, that this is something that they have, you know, the rapport that they have, they've been working on since clearly like Sailor has been able to speak. The rapport that Charlie has with his publisher, or his editor, I think it might be his editor, and his friend, I also, you know, they've been friends apparently for years, and I buy it. You know, I completely buy it. They're 100% comfortable around each other. You know, Snyder's just really great at writing these relationships. His pacing is great. He manages to keep it so that you are constantly guessing when the next horrific, nightmarish thing might happen, and when you're just having a nice moment. You're never really certain, because he hasn't, in my opinion, established a pattern, which is, I think, is great and very important when you're dealing with horror. He knows what he's doing with this, and he's doing it well, and he's doing it from the heart, and it makes a huge difference, in my opinion, in his storytelling abilities. So let's just move on to Jock. I'd never seen his art before. I didn't read Batman Black Mirror, so I was completely unaware of his art, and now I can't get enough of it. It's so perfectly paired with Snyder's, not only Snyder's writing, but with a story of this nature. And then you throw in Hollingsworth's coloring, and it's a match made in heaven for me. The human figures, like the characters that we see, are fairly realistically drawn, but with this great illustrative quality where you have a fairly heavy line around it. And I think that's really important, because I think if this book were so hyper realistically drawn that it looked like an actual person, that whenever you saw something horrific happen to that person, or if you saw one of the witches, be so unnerved by the art, I think it would unbalance everything. Right now there is, for me, a really great melding of art and story going on. But I do understand that maybe some people may not be a fan of this style of art. There's a certain chaos to it. In the coloring, they use a lot of splatters, which in the back of the book, in issue 2 and 3, especially in 3, they start to explain how the art style develops. They explain that some of the splatters are actually hand-painted acrylic and watercolors that they scan in and then lay over. But because of those splatters, it can be difficult at times to tell what's happening in a way, especially when you see like images of the woods, or like, you know, something a little further off. You're like, I don't know what I'm seeing. What is that? I don't know. But that in and of itself, I think, adds an extra element of horror to it. When you're dealing with a horror movie, typically if there's something going on in the background, maybe you notice it, maybe you don't. Maybe you're too busy looking at the character on screen, and then you and the character share that moment of realizing something horrific is happening. When you have a static image in front of you, you get the opportunity to essentially see this image all at once. You've seen everything in it. And with this art style, you have the opportunity to question what you're seeing and then have that same realization you might have in a horror movie. And I've actually had the opportunity, I've read all of these issues more than once at this point, where I have picked up subtle things in the art that I hadn't noticed. There's actually a moment in the book in issue 3 where we see one of those like tree hollows, and the first time reading through, I didn't notice there was a bunch of insects just pouring out of it. I didn't even notice that the first time through, and I really like that, but I definitely could understand that this style of art might turn someone off. This book is very unnerving with the combination of this, you know, very chaotic art style paired with this these very realistic conversations that people are having and these fairly realistic characters. Then you have this whole supernatural world that essentially part of the, I think for me, one of the most unnerving aspects of the book is that there's no control over that. I want to just talk a little bit about something that really got to me. On my second reading through, I don't know, just it hit me right in the face. Part of the reason that Sailor left, or her family left the old town that they had been in, was because she had been bullied, and I mean like fairly horrifically bullied. And it was just one of those instances where seemingly there was no reason. Like, the girl, as you find out, did have some like issues herself, who was bullying her, but she just pinpointed Sailor. Like, she just doesn't like her. Inevitably, something happens to the bully, and Sailor is injured. She ends up having a head injury during this moment. As you find out, the bully disappears, and we of course understand why, because we get to read the flashback. But I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to read it yourself. But everyone else isn't certain what happens, but they know that this girl, this bully, did have some severe issues. And they find all about how, like, she had been bullying Sailor. And it's not that anyone blames Sailor, it's just that when Sailor presents them with her version of the story, they're fairly certain she's lost her mind. And I think that is so interesting, and in and of itself, such a nightmare scenario. Sailor is put into this situation where, at last, although horrifically, her bully is gone, and she's free from that. But now everyone thinks she's crazy. Like, they think she has a mental issue because of what she ends up telling them. She tells them the truth and nobody believes her. Obviously, as time goes on throughout these issues, people around her start to realize that there are other things happening. But you gotta think about all these months and weeks that have been going by where, you know, she's questioning her own sanity. And I just think that is such an amazing level of its own nightmarish horror that he's put into this supernatural horror. It's just, again, it's just evidence of Snyder's storytelling ability, where he's just giving you all of these different layers, so it's not this one-note story. So I guess what I want to ask you guys is, if you were in a situation where something paranormal or supernatural happened and you had to explain it to people, would you do it? If people were going to blame you for something otherwise, would you tell them, or would you be too afraid of what they thought about you? And then how would you deal with it if you did tell them? I don't know what I would do in that situation. Also, what is your favorite type of horror? Like, does this do it for you? Do you like this kind of, you know, weaving story where there is definitely a little bit of gore? And I guarantee you that if this is put into any other medium, there's going to definitely be some jump scares in there as well, which I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of. But what's your favorite kind of horror? Do you like a thriller? Do you like a story-driven one? Do you like, you know, your typical slasher flick? Or do you like one that's just chock full of blood and guts? What do you guys like? I'd love to hear about it. I'd also love to hear if you guys have read Witches. Are you a fan? If you're a fan of Scott Snyder, in his DC runs, how do you feel about him writing something like this? So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, it's kind of it for me. I can't thank you guys enough, honestly, for the great response. I know I already did that, but seriously, I really appreciate it. And if I haven't had the opportunity to get to your comment from Bitch Planet, just give me some time. I definitely am going to get to all of them. I like to, really, consider what you've written and then give you a response back. If you have any thoughts about Witches, for or against it, let's talk about it. I'd love to hear it. But otherwise, I'm Tiffany for Hack and Splash Page, and thanks for watching, and, don't go in the woods.
I think they argue that, he's his cousin or something. I mean, Kara Zor-El, Clark's cousin, that's the same deal. They're like, oh, it's my cousin from Kansas. Supergirl is, her pseudonym is that she's, Clark's cousin from Kansas. So they just say, oh, it's my nephew from Kansas. Got a whole brood of them back in Kansas.
You got little ones, too.
Yeah. Yeah, little cousins.
You got a whole slew of them.
Yeah, they're all wearing glasses.
They breathe like rabbits.
Little tiny glasses.
They're monocles.
Here you go.